The excitement in the air was palpable as we gathered for my daughter Marissa's wedding rehearsal dinner. My heart swelled with pride as I watched her and her fiancé Kevin, surrounded by family and friends, basking in the glow of well wishes. But then, in the midst of all the joy, something took a sharp turn. Marissa stood up and called for everyone's attention, and like a switch being flipped, the room fell silent. My husband, Ron, and I exchanged confused glances. What was happening? Marissa raised her glass, her eyes steady on mine. I want to talk about something important, she declared, her voice cutting through the tension. And then, to my utter disbelief, she turned her words directly towards me. Elise, you might think of yourself as my stepmother, but to me, you're just someone I don't want in my life. The guests were visibly shocked. Ron looked like he'd seen a ghost, his face draining of color. My heart sank, and I felt as if the air had been knocked out of me. Her words weren't just hurtful, they were devastating. What was happening to the sweet girl I once knew? What's going on, Marissa? Ron asked, his voice quivering. But Marissa wasn't finished. Don't act like you don't know, Dad, she spat, her sneer clear as day. You know that Elise has been trying to become part of our family from the start. Well, I'm done pretending. She's not my mom, and she never will be. Her words were like a knife twisting in my chest. I could barely breathe. I looked at Marissa, hoping to see the girl I loved, but instead, all I could see was a wall of anger and hatred. Marissa, please, I pleaded, my voice trembling. Let's not do this now. But she didn't hesitate. Why not? She shot back. This is my day, and I'll say whatever I want. Ron clenched his fists in frustration, trying to hold it together. That's enough, he said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. We're leaving. Marissa didn't even flinch. She simply smirked and turned away, leaving me to face the stares and whispered judgments of the guests as we walked out. Their eyes felt like daggers, each one silently questioning what I had done to make my own stepdaughter hate me so much. Tears streamed down my face as we left the venue. I could feel the weight of the moment settling in. Everything had changed. In the car, Ron gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. His face was a mixture of anger and sadness. I don't understand what's wrong with her, Elise, he said, his voice tight with emotion. But I won't let her hurt you like this. I didn't respond. I was too overwhelmed to speak. All I could think about was what had just happened and why Marissa had turned on me so fiercely. I thought back to when it all started, wondering when exactly Marissa had begun to hate me. Was it when I married Ron? When I became her stepmother? Or was it something earlier? Something her mother, Clara, had planted in her mind? Clara had always made her feelings clear, running her fingers through Marissa's hair and whispering, "No one can take your real mom's place." Even then, her words had made me uneasy, but I tried to push the discomfort aside. I wanted so badly to build a good relationship with Marissa. I didn't want to be anyone's replacement. I just wanted to be a friend. But Marissa's cold eyes spoke a different truth. At first, Marissa was polite, though distant, but as time went on, her resentment began to show more clearly. "Why are you always trying to get involved in my life?" she snapped one evening when I asked about her weekend plans. Ron shot her a disapproving look. "Marissa, don't talk to your mom like that." "She's not my mom," Marissa shouted, her face twisted in anger. "And I'm tired of her pretending she is." With that, she stormed off, leaving me crushed. Ron could only shake his head, clearly disappointed. It wasn't long before her dislike for me became glaringly obvious. Every time I walked into a room, she would roll her eyes or mutter something under her breath. If I offered to help, she would reject me with cold, rude comments. "You're not fooling anyone with your fake kindness?" She hissed one day when I offered to drive her to a friend's house. "Stop it," Ron snapped, his frustration building. But it didn't stop. It only got worse. It was clear that Clara was fueling Marissa's anger towards me. Each time we ran into her, Clara would put on her sweet, innocent act. "I don't know what you've done to make my daughter hate you," she'd say, her smile sugary but her eyes full of malice. "But I guess you have to deal with the consequences." And that's exactly what I did. Marissa's hatred festered, spreading like an untreated wound, making our lives unbearable. I didn't realize at the time, but her cruel behavior was only the beginning. As time passed, Marissa became even more manipulative. After dropping out of college without a clear plan for her future, she seemed determined to tear our lives apart. One day, while I was in the kitchen, she cornered me. "Give me $5,000 or I'll tell everyone what a terrible stepmom you are," she said, her voice cold and calculating. I froze. "Marissa, why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I've tried to be good to you. Forget it," she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "Just give me the money and I'll leave you alone." My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't just anger, it was manipulation, plain and simple. I don't have that much money right now, I said, trying to stay calm. But she wasn't listening. Then you better find it, she threatened, unless you want everyone to know how awful you really are. The demands didn't stop. Marissa kept coming back for more money, each time her threats growing bolder. Ron, caught between us, pleaded with me. Just give her what she wants, Elise, he said after yet another tear-filled argument. I can't handle this anymore. But I knew that if I gave in, it would only make things worse. So, despite the mounting pressure, I stood my ground. You think you're so perfect with your job at the high school, she spat one day, her words laced with venom. Just wait until everyone finds out who you really are. The threat sent chills down my spine. I could already picture the lies she might spread, tarnishing my reputation, destroying the career I'd worked so hard for. And through it all, Clara continued to stand by her daughter's side, silently cheering her on. You get what you give, Elise, she'd say, her voice soft but filled with judgment. Maybe if you were a better stepmom, Marissa wouldn't act like this. Every word felt like a punch to the gut, and I could feel the weight of her betrayal settling deep inside me. But, in the midst of all the hurt, something inside me shifted. I couldn't keep letting Marissa and Clara tear us apart. If Marissa wanted a fight, she was going to get one. It was time for me to stand up, not just for myself, but for my family. The truth about Marissa's cruelty needed to be known. Even if it meant doing things I never thought I could do, I was ready. Worse, it felt like she relished every moment of making me suffer, testing just how far she could push before I finally broke. I need $3,000 more for my dress alterations, she said one evening, strolling into the living room without even a hello. Ron looked at me, silently pleading with me to give in, but I couldn't take it anymore. No, Marissa, I've had enough, I said, my voice steady, but my heart pounding with frustration. She acted surprised, raising an eyebrow. What? Are you going to cry to Daddy like you always do? She taunted, her voice dripping with mockery. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to lash out. You ungrateful child, I snapped, my fury bubbling to the surface. Your dad and I have done everything for you, and this is how you repay us? Marissa's laugh echoed through the room, a high-pitched sound that only fueled my anger. You're not fooling anyone, she sneered. You're just a sad, insecure woman trying to buy your way into our family. Her words cut deep, but before I could respond, she struck one last blow. You think the school wants someone like you? Just wait until they find out about your drinking problem. A wave of nausea hit me, my stomach turning as her words sank in. Marissa was plotting to destroy my career, to tear down everything I had worked for, all with lies. Marissa, stop it, Ron yelled, his face red with fury, but she simply smirked, as if savoring every moment of the chaos she was creating. In that instant, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to be her victim anymore. I'm done, I said, my voice firm, cutting through the tension. Leave, and don't come back until you can act like a decent person. Marissa's eyes widened in surprise, but that soon morphed into a twisted smirk. She leaned in close, her breath hot against my skin. You'll regret this, she whispered, her words laced with venom. With that, she stormed out, leaving the room thick with silence. Ron stared at me, lost, as though he didn't fully understand what had just transpired. I'm sorry, Elise. I don't know what's wrong with her, he muttered, rubbing his temples in frustration. But I knew better. This wasn't some sudden outburst. It was years of Clara's influence, years of manipulation. As Marissa's threats echoed in my mind, I felt a fire ignite within me. She thought she could ruin my life with lies? She was sorely mistaken. If she wanted a fight, she was going to get one. I knew then I couldn't rely on Ron to help me. His love for his daughter blinded him to her cruelty. This was my battle, and I had to fight it alone. That's when Derek came into the picture. He had been Marissa's boyfriend before she changed, and we happened to run into each other at the grocery store. As we started talking, everything began to click. She's not who you think she is, Derek said, regret lining his voice. She lied to me about you and Ron. My heart sank as Derek shared what Marissa had done. She'd twisted the truth, painting me as the villain, claiming I was trying to control their family and that Ron was cruel to them. He had believed her at first because she was so convincing, so angry. But when they broke up, the truth began to unravel. As Derek spoke, I felt a cold dread settle in. Marissa's lies were much deeper than I had realized. She'd woven a web of deceit, manipulating everyone around her. And Clara, Marissa's mother, was the mastermind behind it all. Marissa's mom has been poisoning her thoughts about you from the very beginning, Derek said, his words like a punch to my gut. Suddenly, everything made sense. They had been working together to turn Marissa against me, to paint me as the villain in their twisted narrative. But there was more. Derek dropped another bombshell. Marissa's getting married for all the wrong reasons, he said, shaking his head. Not because she loves Kevin, but because of his money and status. She's just using him. The weight of his words hit me like a freight train. I had always suspected that Marissa didn't truly care about Kevin, but hearing it laid bare like that was a blow I wasn't prepared for. Derek's words echoed in my mind, leaving me reeling. When she gets what she wants, she'll leave him and find someone else to use. After Derek left, I was left standing in a haze, my thoughts swirling with everything he had revealed. I had let Marissa and Clara control my life for far too long, but no more. Armed with the truth, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep playing the victim. It was time to take control, to expose the lies and show everyone who Marissa truly was. The day of Marissa's wedding arrived, and the tension in the air was palpable. As I watched her prepare, my determination solidified. This was it. This was the day I would finally expose the truth. You look so pretty, my dear, Clara said sweetly, adjusting Marissa's veil. She beamed with pride, soaking up her mother's praise like it was the sun, but it only made me uneasy. Yes, it's like a fairy tale, I remarked, unable to hide the bitterness in my tone. With a handsome prince and a mean stepmother. Clara's eyes narrowed, but Marissa just laughed, not understanding or caring about the sting in my words. Speaking of mean stepmothers, she said calmly, her voice like ice, I'm surprised you came at all after everything you've done to me. I thought you might skip the whole thing. A bitter laugh escaped me. Oh, believe me, I thought about it, but I couldn't miss this moment. Before Marissa could retort, Ron poked his head into the room, his smile strained. Everything okay here? He asked. Just fine, Dad, Marissa replied sweetly, her sarcasm dripping from every word, but Ron didn't catch it. Well, it's almost time. You ready? Marissa nodded eagerly, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. As the music swelled and the doors opened, I took a deep breath. It was now or never. The ceremony passed quickly, the vows feeling hollow, like empty words. But when it came time for Kevin and Marissa to kiss, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. Wait, I shouted, my voice cutting through the hushed room. All eyes turned to me, and Marissa's face turned beet red with fury. What's going on? She hissed, fists clenched. I squared my shoulders, meeting her gaze. What this means is that I can't stay quiet anymore while you keep lying and manipulating everyone around you. Clara looked pale, the realization dawning on her. But I wasn't done. You've been spreading lies and turning people against me, pretending to be the innocent one, I said, my voice steady and firm. But not anymore. It's time for the truth. With that, I revealed the proof, texts, emails, recordings, everything Derek had shared with me. This is what you've been doing behind closed doors, I said, my voice unwavering. The room was dead silent, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The chapel fell into an eerie silence as the evidence of Marissa's deceit began to unfold, one shocking revelation after another. It was as if time had stopped. Marissa, once poised and calm, now stood exposed, her perfect mask shattering before everyone's eyes. A flicker of fury crossed her face, quickly replaced by an expression of utter disbelief. You're lying, she hissed, her voice sharp, fingers trembling as they reached toward me. How dare you ruin my special day? But the damage had been done, and there was no turning back. The truth had come to light, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The room was filled with gasps and murmurs, a collective sense of shock washing over Kevin's family as they witnessed the unraveling of everything Marissa had carefully built. In that moment, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. Watching her fall apart, her lies exposed, felt like a victory, not one achieved by manipulation, but through the sheer force of truth. It was the darkness beneath her perfect facade that had been laid bare, and for once she could no longer hide. The room, once calm and expectant, now erupted into chaos. Voices rose, angry shouts and cries of disbelief filling the air. How could you, Marissa? Someone shouted, their voice thick with emotion. This was supposed to be my special day. I stood tall, unflinching, my words firm. Your special day was built on lies, I retorted, meeting her gaze. You can't deceive people forever. Marissa's eyes flashed with rage, but before she could retort, Kevin stepped forward. His face was pale, eyes wide with hurt and confusion. Is it true? His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. Were you just using me? The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone held their breath, waiting for Marissa's answer. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then, just like that, the mask was back. A smile, cold and calculated, spread across her face. No, of course not, darling, she cooed, reaching out to touch Kevin's face. You know I love you. Elise is just trying to cause trouble like she always does. The audacity. The nerve. I clenched my fists, fighting back the surge of anger threatening to boil over. Did she really think she could just erase the truth with a few empty words? Apparently, she did. Her eyes locked onto mine, and with a sneer, she snapped, "This is all your fault." Her finger jabbed in my direction, pointing at me accusingly. "If you hadn't interfered, none of this would be happening." Before I could respond, Ron's voice thundered through the tension in the room. "Stop!" he bellowed, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. We all turned to see him, standing tall and livid. "I can't believe what I'm hearing," he said, his voice shaking with disbelief. "My own daughter, lying and manipulating everyone for her own selfish reasons." For once, Marissa was silent. She couldn't respond. Ron's words had cut through her defense like a blade, leaving her momentarily speechless. The weight of his disappointment seemed to crush her, and it was almost as if the air in the room had shifted. "I don't even recognize you anymore," Ron continued, his voice thick with sorrow. "The girl I raised, the one who was kind and loving, she's gone, isn't she?" The finality in his words hung in the air, and a heavy silence settled over the room. It wasn't just Marissa who felt the sting of his words, but Clara too. The two exchanged a tense look, a silent battle raging between them. Then Clara spoke, her voice sharp. "Well?" she demanded, eyes narrowed. "Aren't you going to speak up? Defend yourself?" But Marissa, defeated, remained silent. She looked smaller, fragile even, like a shadow of the woman she had been. Clara snorted in disgust, her contempt palpable. Without a word, she stormed out, leaving behind a stunned silence. Kevin's family followed, their expressions a mix of pity and revulsion. And just like that, it was over. Marissa's grand plan had crumbled, leaving her dreams shattered as Kevin walked away, broken-hearted. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy for him, for he too had been caught in the web of her deceit. But that sympathy was fleeting, quickly replaced by a deep, satisfied sense of justice. The truth had come out, and Marissa had done this to herself. No more lies, no more manipulation, just the harsh reality of her actions. In the days that followed, the consequences of Marissa's lies rippled through the community. News of her betrayal spread like wildfire, and soon she found herself shunned by the very people she had once hoped to impress. The cold reality hit when I saw her standing on her mother's doorstep, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Mom," she begged, her voice breaking. "I need your help. I have nowhere else to go." But Clara's response was cold and unwavering. She looked at her daughter with a mixture of disgust and pity. "Help you?" Clara scoffed. "After what you've done? After embarrassing our family?" The sting of those words was evident on Marissa's face, but she didn't back down. But you're my mom. You're supposed to support me no matter what." Clara shook her head, the disappointment clear in her eyes. "You don't understand, do you? There's no support left for you. You've pushed everyone away with your selfishness and lies." Those words hit Marissa like a physical blow, and I watched as the realization slowly dawned on her. The loneliness, the isolation. You don't mean that," Marissa whispered, her voice trembling, her hand outstretched as if to beg for her mother's love. But Clara stepped back, her face hardening. "I don't recognize you anymore," she said firmly. "The daughter I knew wouldn't have done what you did. You made your choices, Marissa. Now you have to face the consequences." With those final words, Clara turned her back and walked inside, leaving Marissa standing on the doorstep, broken and alone. The weight of the truth had crushed her, and she was left with nothing.